Everything that could burn was burned within 5 hours that night. Good Friday. It was March the 21st, 1788. Started at the home of the Minister of Finance named Nunez. The town had few buckets or emergency water. St. Louis Church burned to rubble. So did the priest's lodges, the cabildo, the military barracks at the plaza, and the stockade where guards released prisoners to save their lives. The billowing trail of fire left torch-high plots where houses had been at noon. The flames raged along St. Peter's Street to cross the street below the Plaza de Armes amid a boom of explosions from loaded weapons people had stored in their houses. The Holy Cross burned with a ferocity no one there had ever seen. In less than 5 hours, 856 buildings were destroyed. 8/10 of the homes, the core of the business district, most of the mansions of French design, a smoking semi-carcass of the city as flames sputtered out toward 8 that night. The thing is, that night of the fire, when everyone ran toward the river, you basically went with the clothes you had on. According to a book called The Accidental City, of all that disaster, there was only one person killed in the fire. No accounting has been made, however, for the people who may have been chained to their workstation or locked in what used to be called pens or cells, waiting for the sale the next morning. There is no report of the sounds of their howls as they burned to death. So as the city burned, one of the little sisters from the Ursuline convent went and got a statue she had brought from France of Jesus' mother. It was Our Lady of Prompt Succor. Before the fire got all the way to the convent, glad to have you. Before the fire got all the way to the convent, the fire was out. Which makes the Ursuline Convent one of the oldest buildings in the Mississippi River Valley. I don't know. I just know the story is that the little nun put the statue in the building and the building did not burn. With dawn, the scene appeared more horrible and pitiful. A numbed Governor Miro wrote in his report to Havana, "Seeing along the road in the most abject misery so many families who had a few hours before enjoyed large fortunes and more than average comforts of life. Miro had seen soldiers die in battle, yet he was unnerved by the sobbing and ghastliness of faces in the ruins of a city that had taken 70 years to build." Charles III of Spain had to do everything he could to keep this bunch out of his business in New Orleans, who were called Americans. You don't want them involved in your business. the British had spent a whole bunch of money defending the Americans during the 7 Years' War, which on this continent was called the French and Indian War, because the French had allied themselves with the Northeast Indians. It was terrible. They destroyed each other's towns and killed each other's children. It was a very terrible, terrible 7 Years' War that finally ended in 1763. British Parliament came up with this big idea that they were going to get the Americans to pay for their own self-defense by paying taxes. As we all know, Americans don't pay taxes. There was some kind of a big kerfuffle over the price of tea in Boston, which we have nothing to do with. So the Americans got really mad, and in 1776 wrote what they called their Declaration of Independence. You understand, one guy's declaration is another guy's manifesto. So they said they had been endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, among them life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Then they listed all these complaints they had against King George III. One of the complaints they had about him, you can read it yourself, is that he had failed to adequately defend them from murderous Indian savages. There are probably whole websites dedicated to that question. Well, that was the point of the whole taxes in the first place, to defend the Americans from the French and Indians during the French and Indian War. By 1781, the Americans had succeeded in their independence against their British parents, but then they became the Ferengi of the trading world. You see, the Americans had no commitment to any particular king, no commitment to any particular religion. They didn't care what your ethnicity was. Gold, show me the money was the Americans' commitment. You didn't want them involved in your business because it was going to be bad. They weren't going to trade well. Charles III had to keep these people out of his business, and that's why it became so very important for him to reestablish or finance the rebuilding of New Orleans. From the governor's office upwind of the fire, Miro and Martin Navarro, the crown tax collector, secured the colonial archives and the king's funds. They threw themselves into emergency relief, giving out military tents to house the hundreds of families, homeless, with rice, biscuits, and petty cash for basic needs. They were going to do it this time. Well, so many things had been destroyed, and then of course later in the spring the rains came, so sure enough that summer saw a terrible yellow fever epidemic. And then in the fall of 1988, and then in the fall of 1788, with all of their construction semi-done, came yet another big hurricane and knocked back the work they had already done. 3 major hurricanes in that year, and a fire. Then have the difficult assignment to tell you, in December of 1788, after he had been with them through the Great Fire, through 3 hurricanes, through a yellow fever epidemic, their great benefactor, King Charles III, died. What were they going to do now when the news reached them?
I think to myself,